Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have been requested to give a keynote address at this meeting, and I should like to begin by thanking His Excellency the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Minister of Hydrocarbons, and all the organizers of this event. I would also want to express my appreciation and that of our Continental Energy Organization, which I humbly represent, the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APPO, for the invitation to take part in this important launching ceremony of the first phase of the bidding rounds for oil and gas blocks in APPO Member Country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I would also want to express our gratitude to the government and good people of the Democratic Republic of Congo for the very warm reception we have received since our arrival in the city of Kinshasa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today's event is historic in the sense that it's the first planned bidding process since the passage of the 2015 DRC hydrocarbon laws. But more important is the fact that this is taking place at a time that some external forces are putting undue pressure on African countries that have been blessed with oil and gas resources to abandon these resources in the name of remedying the harm that these countries have caused to the world over a period of more than 150 years. The Industrial Revolution that transformed the quality of life of Europeans and Americans from the middle of the 19th century couldn't have succeeded the way it did without the abundance of oil. From the middle of the 19th century to the last quarter of the 20th century, a large proportion of the progress that the world made in science, in technology, in medicine, in agriculture, in transportation and communication can be attributed to the abundance of oil and gas as sources of energy. Excellencies, Africa's interest must be defined by Africans. We must not allow ourselves to be cowed into abandoning our right to think and determine what is in our best interest. We must not be made to always look to others for guidance about what is right for us. We agree that we live in a global village, but we also posit that even in that village, the circumstances of the inhabitants vary tremendously. Ours is an imminent existential challenge. While we do not contest the science of climate change and its effects on the atmosphere, our position is that those who are putting pressure on us to abandon fossil fuels in a hurry have lost the moral right to do so because they spent over 150 years using the same fuels, even when their own scientists had established to them as far back as 1856 that burning fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases, which is detrimental to the atmosphere. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the global paradigm shift away from fossil fuels to renewable energies pose serious threats, I dare say existential threats, to our countries, many of whose economies are highly dependent on oil and gas revenues to meet the day-to-day obligations of governance. A major study commissioned by the Council of Ministers of APPO on the future of the oil and gas industry in Africa in the light of the energy transition identified 4 major challenges that Africa must address if it is to continue to benefit from the over 125 billion barrels of proven crude reserves and over 500 trillion cubic feet of gas. These are technology challenge, funding challenge, market challenge, and industry capacity or expertise challenge. The study established that for the most part of their involvement in oil and gas production, African countries have been heavily dependent on foreign technology for upstream, midstream, and downstream operations. They have relied on international oil companies and international oil service companies. With the exception of a very few countries, all are heavily dependent on foreigners for exploration, refining, and processing technologies. The study also established that African countries rely heavily on foreign funding for the industry, and this applies to the new entrants as much as the old. On the oil and gas market, the study noted that 75% of the crude oil that we produce on the African continent is exported in its crude form, while 25% is refined within the continent. At the same time, some 40% of gas produced on the continent is exported. It further noted that the oil and gas infrastructure in African countries were established to meet foreign needs and wants, not those of Africans. Hence, oil and gas pipelines always run from oil fields to the coast, where terminals are built to facilitate exportation of this resource. The study furthermore noted that Africans have developed consumption patterns that have led us to want to continue exporting crude oil and gas in order to obtain the foreign currencies with which to satisfy our appetite for imported foreign goods and services. The final finding is that despite decades of involvement in the oil and gas industry, Africans are yet to fully master the technology and operations of the industry. We still send our operators to foreign continents to learn new technologies of the industry, at least until those countries completely shut down their oil and gas research, development, and training centers due to regulations from their home governments. What is APPO doing about these identified challenges? I'm pleased to note that the APPO Ministerial Council in December last year approved a number of measures meant to address these identified challenges, and the Secretariat has begun work to implement these measures. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it might interest you to know that on funding for the industry, APPO signed a memorandum of understanding with the Afri-Exim Bank last May to establish the Africa Energy Bank. The focus of this bank shall be the provision of funds for oil and gas projects on the African continent. This is critical in view of the decision of the traditional financiers of the industry to quit funding fossil fuel projects, particularly in Africa. We have been having technical meetings with AfriExim, the last of which was held in Abuja last week. In addition, we had intimated the CEOs of member country NOCs during a meeting in Abuja also last week that Africa shall need to look within to raise the necessary capital to fund the industry, a proposal with which they are fully in agreement. On technology, it might also interest this audience to know that a team from the APPO Secretariat is currently visiting some member countries with a view to evaluating the research, development, and training facilities they have, with a view to upgrading and designating some of these facilities as APPO Centers of Excellence in Oil and Gas Research, Development, Innovation, and Training. We shall have these centers in various regions of the continent to cater for the various sectors of the industry, upstream, midstream, downstream, and services. This exercise shall take care of the two challenges of technology and capacity building. Finally, on the market, I'm pleased to say that at last, our leaders are today championing the development of the Africa oil and gas industry for the good of Africans. They are working around the clock to ensure that necessary infrastructure are in place to create an integrated Africa energy market. In this respect, permit me to recognize the unparalleled work of His Excellency Gabriel Mbaga Obiang Lima, Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, towards the conceptualization, development, and construction of one of the most ambitious energy infrastructure projects on the African continent, the Central African Pipeline System, CAPS. This is a project in the conceptualization stage that has the greatest potential of transforming the national economies of 9 African countries and the lives of hundreds of millions of Africans in the Central Africa sub-region. And Congo DR is one of them. Permit me to use this opportunity to commend the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo under the able leadership of His Excellency President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi for its support for this very important project. I should also like to recognize the contribution and support to this project by the host minister of APPO, His Excellency Bruno Etua, Minister of Hydrocarbons of the Republic of Congo, and OPEC President. Minister Didier of DRC and many APPO and non-APPO ministers have equally been very supportive of this project. With 1.3 billion people, or 17% of the world's population, 600 million of whom have no access to electricity, and 900 million of whom have no access to any form of modern energy for cooking or other domestic use. People who use sticks, stalks, and cow dung or charcoal to cook and heat their homes. It cannot be rightly said that there is no market for energy in Africa. What is lacking is not the market. It is the commitment to develop that market. Ladies and gentlemen, If there is one positive development that the global energy transition has brought to Africa, it is the recognition that the era of African countries going solo in the oil and gas industry has gone for good. The era of international oil companies comprising investors from various countries of the world dealing with individual African countries is also gone for good. As the CEOs of APPO member countries agreed at their last meeting in Abuja, players in the industry in Africa need to cooperate and collaborate and also share information and data on oil and gas activities. If international oil companies can share information and data among themselves, we see no reason why African countries cannot do the same. They also agreed to pool resources together to develop industry technologies as well as fund the industry on the continent. There is no alternative to this. Any alternative shall spell the collapse of the industry on the continent. I would like to use this opportunity to appeal to our leaders to see the energy transition as an opportunity for Africa to effectively take control of its oil and gas resources in order to use it to eradicate energy poverty on the continent, and by so doing, sow the seed for eradicating the pervasive mass poverty on the African continent, which in turn breeds social violence. For too long, we have dissociated national security from energy security. But in reality, the two are intertwined. You cannot delink food, healthcare, education, commerce, industry, and any meaningful production process from availability and affordability of energy. It is therefore imperative that energy security is given as much importance as national security in governmental policy making. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to please use this opportunity to restate APPO's position on the energy transition. APPO is not against energy transition, nor are we against any fair, just, and equitable policy or measures to protect the atmosphere from harmful emissions and consequently improve the life of humanity. What we are against is the attempt by some powerful nations who contributed the most to global climate change challenge to force us to take a part to energy transition that negates the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change accepted principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different national circumstances. When I read about attempts by the climate lobby to stop DRC from proceeding with this important event, I asked myself, who is sponsoring these protests? Are these people aware that, technically speaking, Democratic Republic of Congo is a net negative emitter? Are they aware that DRC forest, which is the world's second largest dense forest, absorbs 4% of global emissions, which is more than the whole of Africa emits, namely 3%. In other words, the whole of Africa emits 3%. Congo alone is able to absorb 4%. So technically speaking, Africa is negative. We are not talking of they can talk about net zero. We have passed net zero. We are net negative, and we can't be pushed to do what will eventually destroy us and destroy our future generations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa has everything it takes to be a major player in the global energy economy, whether it is fossil fuel or renewable energy fuel driven. Our continent is endowed with abundant minerals such as nickel, lithium, cobalt, copper, and many other mineral resources essential for the new energy economy. DRC alone is rich in all the minerals of the renewable energy economy that I have just listed. The continent is on the verge of achieving an industrial breakthrough and will need all the energy it can get to make this breakthrough a reality. How many factories have closed down in Africa because of lack of energy? How many young Africans have been made idle and put out of work because there is no energy to run the factories? Any attempt to deny Africa access to any particular form of energy at this time will be interpreted as an attempt to deny Africa the opportunity to free itself from the yoke of poverty and underdevelopment. As you embark on your roadshows for this bidding exercise, Minister Didier Ntubwanga, I urge DRC to seriously consider African countries and their NOCs and private oil and gas companies as potential partners in developing the DR Congo oil and gas industry. I also urge African operators that have for decades been operating in silos in their national territories to consider coming out of those silos to partner with other African companies to take the destiny of the industry in their own hands. This is the time for the industry champion in oil and gas producing countries on the continent to come together to form continent-wide regional or sub-regional oil and gas multinationals. We must begin to see and operate beyond the colonial boundaries. There is no better time than now that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has come into force. On our part as APPO, we are proud of our contribution to the process that led to this bidding exercise. And I want to assure member country DRC that APPO shall be with you all the way to ensure the success of this laudable initiative. In conclusion, let me, on behalf of all of us at the APPO Secretariat and our member countries, wish the Democratic Republic of Congo a successful outing in the bid round. Let me also express the Secretariat's appreciation to all the delegations from APPO member countries for the brotherly support they have shown to member country Democratic Republic of Congo and Minister Didier Ntubwanga. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Secretary General of African Petroleum Producers Organization. Thank you for your support, for your advocacy, and thank you for reminding us the challenge we are facing of. Thank you so much. J'en profite pour accueillir